So welcome, everybody. I'm really glad you're here, and welcome especially to the free thinkers who have adopted our program tonight, as their monthly meeting. What I hope you're seeing are various pictures of the old state capitol. I am not seeing that, so that's why I'm asking what y'all are seeing. Okay, you're not seeing that either.
I'm just seeing us.
Yeah, me too. I like seeing us, but I really want to show you my presentation.
Okay.
So I'm going to try something else now.
I'm trying one more time, Caroline.
Oh, hey, Mary. Thanks.
Just hit share screen under the security thing.
Oh, I went on and did it again, and it's come up now. So perfect. We got the thank you so much.
Got it.
I also want to welcome a student who is a PhD candidate in public history who emailed me earlier today and said she's committed to public history and wanted to know more about this particular program. And so I'll be reaching out to you tomorrow or the next day to see what you thought of this program. We're trying a lot of firsts, not just because of the pandemic, but just because we are always trying new things to get better and reach wider audiences. But as I said, I really want to give a special thank you to the free thinkers for joining us tonight. I'm going to ask all of you to continue to be free thinkers, but mute your microphones. And after my presentation, we'll open up your microphones, unmute everyone, and we'll have a discussion. I have a few discussion prompts that we can either pursue or ignore, depending on what you'd like to do. But first, I'll talk for about 20 minutes with some slides, and then we'll open it up for discussion. And anyone who wants to join the free thinkers in that discussion after my presentation, you are more than welcome. So thanks so much for joining us, y'all. Just sit back and relax. Tonight's program was advertised with the title, How to Become a Philanthropist. And actually, I will be talking about that, but mostly I'm going to be talking about the exhibit that inspired that question. And it's called 40 Chances, Finding Hope in a Hungry World. The person whose photographs inspired the exhibit also wrote the book that you see on your left, which I've got in my hand right here also, with the same title, 40 Chances, Finding Hope in a Hungry World. I'm going to talk about how this project came to be. The exhibit is traveling all over the world. And right now it's in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, at Louisiana's old state capitol through near the end of June. It is safe to visit the old state capitol. It's really easy to stay 6 feet away from other visitors in a 10,000 square foot building. And we've got sanitation stations throughout. But if you're still in quarantine and you prefer to see a gallery walkthrough of the exhibit online, we've provided that for you at louisianaoldstatecapitol.org, our website. But you're about to see a lot of it here tonight. So let's start. First of all, it started with the challenge. If someone gave you a few $1 billion to make the world a better place, what would you do? I am sure each of you has an amazing response to that. You can feel free to use our chat box to put in your response if you wish. Any questions you have during the exhibit, you can also put there. And we can also talk about those ideas when we unmute ourselves and have a more open discussion. So this exhibit, as I say in the book, came out of this challenge. And this challenge became known as the Buffett Challenge, named after Warren Buffett. And if you don't know anything else about this guy, you know that he is one of the wealthiest people on the planet. In fact, I looked it up. His net worth from last year, 98 billion. And yes, initially I thought that was zillion. 98 billion, $200 million. And that is down. His ranking as one of the wealthiest people in the world has gone down in recent years. And we're going to learn why. It has to do with philanthropy. So He made his money in investments, and that's an important thing to know about the way he thinks. He is well known to a lot of folks as somebody who's outspoken and has talked a bit about his relationship with his family. And one of the things you all may know already is that he announced to his family that he had no intention of leaving any money to them at all. My family basically did that too, but it didn't make that much difference. So he did that because his intentions were to give away as much as possible to philanthropic endeavors before his death. So that money would not go to his family. But then a bit later, he talked to his adult children and asked them this question: what would you do if I set up a foundation with a few $1 billion in it that would really change the world? His adult son, Howard Buffett, is a farmer, and he really took this challenge to heart. Howard Buffett is on the left. I've grown to have a crush on this guy who I've never met. Warren Buffett's on the right. That's the guy that y'all probably already know. And that guy in the middle is named Warren Howard Buffett. So one of my kids said, isn't that amazing how people just name themselves after each other? Anyway, the fellow who wrote the book and took the photographs for the exhibit is on the left. His son is in the middle, and Warren Buffett's on the right. So Warren Buffett says to Howard, what would you do? And Howard thought, well, you know what? I'm a farmer. I know about food. I'm interested, very interested in world hunger. And the first thing he decided to do, and this is what everyone should do if they decide to undertake an interest or a project, is to learn more about it. So that's what he did. Now, the next few slides are going to be a little rough because he did learn more about it. He documented it through his photography, and we're about to see some troubling photographs. But we want to learn about what he documented. And Howard also decided he would travel directly to these places to talk to people on the ground and learn more about their situations. Let's go. So this woman on the left, she lives among the rubble left from the Rwandan genocide, which happened 7 years before this photograph was taken. In that genocide, about 800,000 people were killed. She survived by hiding underneath dead bodies. Her husband and children did not survive. I'm sure I don't have to tell you what's on the floor by her feet. She has nothing and she has no one. She's a human being, so she needs to eat, but she can barely function as she's left an emotionally empty shell without support and without the barest of necessities. In the photograph on the right, and by the way, if you can't see it, you can physically move your screenshot so you can see the photographs that I'm sharing with you. In the photograph on the right, just in case you assume that hunger and desperation does not occur in the United States, it does, but perhaps for different reasons. You'll see Everett Stafford, a World War II veteran, saluting the flag on his porch in West Virginia. Buffett writes, "This man was old, tired, and hungry, and he made me realize that hunger and suffering is everywhere, even right here at home." I'd like to add that clinically, it looks as if he's probably suffering from malnutrition. Malnutrition leads to poor brain and body function, disease, and a shortened lifespan. And by the way, even people who eat a lot can suffer from malnutrition if you're not eating nutritious foods. So at the risk of boiling down Howard Buffett's 400-page book too much, but that's what I'm about to do, Howard's truths, that what he learned came down to this basic statement. My book report in one sentence: hunger is intertwined with poverty, fear, conflict, and the lack of opportunities for women. So we're going to briefly touch on each of these things. First, I want to bring your attention to a term that Howard's dad, Warren Buffett, coined, the ovarian lottery, which basically means your chances of success in life may depend entirely on where you were born and to whom you were born. So we'll think about that as we go through these slides. So poverty. Poverty leads to desperation. This is Carla on the left from Honduras, who is sniffing glue. She and her friends sift through garbage dumps for things to eat or to sell so she can get food. But often she and her friends sell their bodies to truckers for money. The decisions she is making are entirely because of the fact that she lives in poverty and she's hungry. This guy from Senegal is shackled and chained along with other children because he didn't bring in enough money from begging. Many kids try to escape these kid prisons because they're hungry, but they do come back because that's the only place where they can find scraps to eat. Fear from being further punished keeps them begging. Buffett saw a lot of these kid prisons. And when he took this photo, he was chased away by a violent mob of local people. And I wrote this on the slide: fear affects children and those with less education more than it affects others. So I went ahead and read a lot of studies that Howard Buffett refers to and others out about world hunger. And so I put some of those basic truths on some of these slides as well. Conflict is the leading cause of hunger, according to governmental studies and NGOs. That's a new term for me, but some of you may already know that. An NGO is a non-governmental organization. Governmental studies from governments and NGOs show that conflict is the leading cause of hunger because it leads to poverty and fear. The photo here shows kids from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where, by the way, more than 6 million people died in a period of about 15 years between 1998 and 2012. Buffett points out a lot in his book. It is not unusual for children to join the military simply to get regular meals. This, as if I haven't shown you enough disturbing images, this little guy who's playing with a handgun is from Bosnia, where a bitter ethnic war killed 100,000 people in the 1990s. The mental trauma of experiencing war as a child, studies show, and I've seen a few, can lead to anguish that lasts a lifetime, making it even harder as an adult to provide for yourself or a family. Howard Buffett, by the way, was briefly jailed by local police for taking pictures like this. So let's address the lack of opportunities for women and girls. The girl on the right, we'll start on the right this time, from India, is already a seasoned prostitute. It's the only way she can eat. 40% of prostitutes in this area are children, and often they're kept in cages to keep them from escaping. On the left is a young girl from Mali, and she did not win the ovarian lottery either. She happened to be born female in a world that put little value in her humanity. She was forced to marry a much older man and left destitute with a child at 16 when he decided to leave her for a 13-year-old. But luckily, there's some hope, guys. I hope you haven't left because these slides and the stories behind them are so disturbing. But sometimes this is what can spur people into philanthropy, actually. But let's talk about hope. And there is a lot of hope. And that was the point of Howard studying this, to learn the truth. Turned out to be even worse than he thought. And then to meet the experts, go on the ground and figure out what would work and give some hope. So poverty costs money to solve, but for each dollar invested wisely, which means the situation is clearly understood on the ground ahead of time. In programs that provide opportunities, many times that amount is generated back to the community itself. Those are facts. Refugee camps can also allow safe havens from fear. They're an unfortunate necessity, but they do often allow safe havens. These two young women at the top of your screen are safe and have access to food and clean water in a refugee camp. But I should add that this particular refugee camp has become overcrowded, and some women, it's still open, still working as a refugee camp. And some of the women there report that they regularly give up meals so their children can eat. I think I posted this on one of my slides, but this is a common expression. Women tend to eat last and they tend to eat least. On the topic of women, though, we're seeing some measurable and positive differences as global outrage is growing about the mistreatment of women and human trafficking. And this has happened significantly in the last 10 years, which also gives us hope. People are being held accountable now for the first time. They can't use religious or social codes to treat women as less than anymore. Laws are circumventing those kinds of excuses. Women are starting to make strides in these areas. Lifting up women, this is a great study, and I can put this in the chat box so you can take a look if you're interested, has been demonstrably shown to improve an entire community. So Howard Buffett really came to recognize over and over again that helping women, providing opportunities for women, helped everybody. On the right, and if you can't see this again, you can move your participants, just click and move that to see that little guy. He's from an area that had a lot of difficulty growing things. And so Howard Buffett really thought about that because that's his specialty. And he really loves healthy natural soils and how to preserve those. The United States is very, very lucky in that we have a huge swath of the United States that has a lot of very rich topsoil. That is not true in most countries around the world, by the way. That was news to me. I thought everybody had soil that could grow things. That is not the case. And in fact, in most of the world, they do not have that. So Howard Buffett thought, well, you know what? If I talk to some experts about how in the world to grow food in places where they don't have great topsoil, maybe that would help. And he found that there were a lot of experts that had ideas, but nobody funded those people because nobody cares unless you're helping your own country. And most of these experts, by the way, were from Texas A&M. And those guys said, man, we have a lot of ideas, but because it doesn't help the United States directly, nobody funds us. So one of the things that Howard thought would be a good idea is to fund those. And so he launched some pilot projects, and those guys came up with remarkable ideas that helped all over the world. And this little guy is smiling because where he lives in Bolivia, they were able to grow things at 10 times the productivity level than they had before, thanks to the fellows at Texas A&M. Now, it's a hard, here's another point I wanted to mention. Howard Buffett, as a farmer, would benefit from government programs here in the US that would purchase food from American farmers and have them shipped all over the world. And this is a practice that goes on a lot. Well, Howard looked into that practice, and even though it would benefit him directly, he decided it was really a bad idea, because what he found was that the food being bought from American farmers cost twice as much to ship. Most of it arrived not in good shape, and the stuff that didn't spoil, like rice and things like that, was being shipped to areas where people were not used to eating rice and didn't even know how to prepare it. And yet, we have all seen photos of people running up to the trucks carrying bags that say USA and that are filled with food from the United States. Those feel-good photos are used to tug at our heartstrings so that we give money to support more of those programs. I've done it myself. I thought it looked good. But Howard, investigating on the ground, thought, wow, there's some real problems here. Well, a lot of these NGOs, non-governmental organizations, still love this idea because those feel-good photos really work, and they do have some short-term benefits. So instead, Howard said, I'm going to go for a less sexy approach, and we're going to continue funding experts here in America to show folks in these areas where they need food how to produce their own food by improving soil quality. Talk about not very sexy, but that's what he's going for. And here is an amazing story. These guys on the left, all right, you can tell by their stance, I think. These guys are leaders in their community with some standing. Now, they were leaders because they brought a lot of money to their community. They brought a lot of money to their community by poaching and helping people from outside of the community come on in and hunt for endangered species animals. And they brought in a ton of money. And these four guys were really well known as the guys who could bring home the bacon. I hate to use that expression here, but I just did. Howard realized that every community is very different. He did not want to take any pride away from these guys and what they were doing, but somehow working with the local community, he talked these four guys into a program where they would feel comfortable, they would maintain their standing in the community by becoming farmers and producing food to feed the community, and actually enough food to sell outside of his community and bring in money to his community as well. And not only that, but he got all four of these guys to pose for this photo with bags of their produce and their guns unloaded, just leaning up against those bags. So there you go. You've got to work with what you've got. And it took many years, but in this particular community, and I'm spacing out on the name of this place, I'll think of it in a second, it totally worked. Howard also produces, if any of you know about farming out there, he promotes a no-till technique that helps retain soil quality. Farming without burning the crops after harvest, which is easier but devastating in promoting healthy soil, apparently. And he also promotes non-systemic pesticides, which are pesticides that kill the animals that eat the bugs that are poisoned by the pesticides. He does not support those. Those are a lot cheaper to make. But he's trying to do the research or get the guys to do the research to come up with pesticides that don't infect an entire system. Now, organic farming, is Howard Buffett a fan of that? Actually, for world hunger, not yet. Organic farming is a toughie. So wealthier nations can afford that, but these nations who are simply trying to provide nutritious meals every day, organic farming is a tough ask right now, but that is an ultimate end goal. So does Howard Buffett choose organic farming on his personal farm? I found out he does not. Just saying. I'm doing my research here. By the way, he seems like a nice guy. I wanted him to speak, and I got a very nice no, but it was very nice. He thought that the internet would not work from wherever he was to speak. So who knows? So Howard's met a lot of failures along the way with trial balloon programs, and he's still meeting those failures. But he looks at those failures as a means for more information. He's pivoting each time and continuing to assess and evaluate each plan for each community in need. The term 40 chances is very meaningful for him. If he farms a bad crop one year, he knows he's got another season coming up to get it right. And over a lifetime, he estimates that farmers have 40 chances to get their crops in the best shape. And so he feels very personally that he has 40 chances to make a real difference and to leave his own legacy. There is a foundation called the Howard Buffett Foundation, which is still at work, and they're still working on his 40 Chances campaign. So let's talk about what's happening locally here. I've got these statistics that are published by different organizations, but are on the Greater Baton Rouge Food Bank site that include figures that affect us here in Baton Rouge, where Louisiana's old state capital is located. So I want to first define food insecurity. I think it's a weird term. It's basically a measure of the availability of food and an individual's ability to access it. In other words, someone who is food insecure lacks reliable access to a sufficient quantity of affordable, nutritious food. So if you live next door to a McDonald's and you eat there every day, it's not nutritious. And you live, that same person lives 3 hours from a farm or a grocery market that has vegetables, you might be considered food insecure. You probably won't be able to afford McDonald's every day either. So those are called food deserts when people live in situations like that. And you take a drive around areas in Baton Rouge and you'll find areas where you don't see supermarkets or farmers' produce stands for miles, but there's tons of McDonald's, tons. And not just McDonald's, Burger King, you name it, tons of those. I've been out delivering food and that's what I've noticed. So let's take a look at some of these figures. I'm going to highlight a few. Louisiana, unfortunately, ranks #1 currently in food insecure seniors in the country. In the Baton Rouge Food Bank service area, not the entire state, which includes East Baton Rouge, West Baton Rouge, Livingston, St. Helena, and Ascension parishes. Whoops, I got an extra comma in there. In that area, 1 in 7 people are food insecure, and 1 in 5 children is food insecure. That is 20%. More than a third of those considered food insecure are not eligible for any government assistance. So they're on their own. Food insecurity, by the way, this is interesting. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, food insecurity is an economic and social indicator of the health of a community. That seems like common sense, but it's also backed up by scientific data. So some more good news. There is a way to help. Here's just one idea. And I know this sounds cheesy, but I'm just throwing it out there. Anyone who brings a non-perishable food item to the Old State Capitol during the run of our exhibit will get a free pass to the only thing we charge for there, because our admission is free. Every day we're open, admission is free. But we do charge for a multimedia award-winning presentation called Ghost of the Castle, which is fabulous, tells a remarkable history, our history in Baton Rouge, in an incredible way. We usually have to charge for that because it's quite expensive to produce and maintain because things are happening all around you. You get a free ticket to that. And if you're a student and you come in with your ID, you'll not only get to see that, but we'll enter your name in a raffle to a drawing for a special tour of the castle. The Old State Capitol looks just like a castle for those of you who haven't seen it. Special tour of the castle to see places the public normally doesn't see, including a catwalk that goes along the roof. That's just one little idea. Yes, I'm going for it, gang. I'd like to get to what our advertised topic is, philanthropy. And this is where the hope is. If those slides bummed you out, it may inspire you, and I'm sure all of you are already philanthropists, it may inspire you to be involved in that sort of philanthropy. The word philanthropy literally means a love of mankind. Sometimes that's hard, and I have to admit, sometimes that's hard for yours truly. But the way I think about it is that a philanthropist is someone who promotes human welfare. That's how I think about it. Now, how does one become a philanthropist, especially if you don't have if you don't have billions of dollars? Well, I hope what you got out of our talk tonight, that the point is, it doesn't matter how much or little you have to give, as long as it represents a good investment. Your canned donation, by the way, to the Old State Capitol will be delivered to the food bank of Baton Rouge, and your clear space in your closet and you've pared down, win-win. To say nothing though, how it makes you feel. A philanthropist is someone who promotes human welfare, and studies show that traditions of philanthropy often start within the family unit. So they aren't necessarily inspired by our religious organizations or schools, but mostly within the family, which I think is interesting. So if a family is in general interested in altruism, that tends to be the entire family who's involved in that. And that actually was my case, not my family, but my friends. Literally, my Quaker friends, and that's what Quakers are called, by the way, they're called friends. So when I was very small, I was 6, my best friend was a Quaker. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, just about lots of Quakers up there. And she showed up to go door to door with me for Halloween with a UNICEF box. Any of you all old enough to remember those little orange boxes? Yay, Margot remembers that. And you not only got candy, but you put pennies in your UNICEF box and you turn it into a donation point, and that money would help children all over the world, especially those who were food insecure, although I didn't know the term back then. So I asked my friend how she knew about these boxes, because I wasn't learning that kind of thing within my family. And she said, well, I'm a Quaker and we live to give. I just was interested in Halloween candy. So that didn't mean anything to me at the time. But 20 years later, it did. That was when I took on my first regular volunteer gig, which was teaching adults how to read. And it changed my life because it changed my perspective. I learned much more than I taught, and I was hooked. And I have a special needs son. Most of you know him, an adult son with autism. He wanted to learn more about plants. So we found a nonprofit that could teach him all about plants, Bird and Gardens, great place to volunteer. And they accepted him, and he volunteered throughout his high school years, and he continues to volunteer now. It changed his life. And in his way, he's told me he's a better guy because of it. Nowadays, volunteering a certain number of hours is expected in order to graduate from high school and college. That wasn't the case for me, but it is now in many high schools and colleges. I recommend that you treat your volunteer job like a paying job, and then you're on your way to doing big things. Nonprofits like the ones I've worked on rely on volunteers. So choose one that interests you and be prepared to work. Or if you don't have time, if you don't have the time, and a lot of us don't, they'll accept your donations of money. You can write a check. It doesn't take much time to write a check. If you don't have the money, I bet you've got expertise. So that's a way to give that a lot of people don't think about. I've got a couple examples. So I needed an engineer to help me move a slave cabin that had been taken apart and not in an organized way. And this fellow from Dow Chemical scratched his head once and then went to work, and the cabin was built in a matter of days. It was amazing. He loved it, and he did it without pay. I probably couldn't have afforded him at the time. The museum where I was working had no money at that time. So expertise is important too. I know we've got somebody with us who's a rocket expert and enthusiast. And years ago, our Boy Scout troop had a rocket enthusiast come out, and they all earned badges and blasted rockets. And this guy was so excited. He said, you know what? I love this hobby, but it's way more fun shooting a rocket with 18 little guys cheering me on. So every year, this guy came back to give us his expertise. So it was great. So there's lots of ways to become a philanthropist. And by the way, I've noticed social media is now big on philanthropy. You can ask others to give to causes in lieu of birthday gifts, via Facebook. I did that. That was pretty fun. My guess is that everyone here tonight is a philanthropist. So if you've helped out a local club, museum, community garden, and done this without compensation, other than the fact that you physically and mentally and socially feel great, and again, studies show that these things do happen, then you're a philanthropist. And I personally think it gives your life meaning. I would now like to ask my supervisor, Mary DeRusso, to talk about, this is a really interesting topic for me, talk about a different kind of philanthropy, corporate philanthropy. She's going to surprise you with some facts and figures that are very, very interesting.
Well, I want to thank everybody for being a part of the call tonight, especially the free thinkers. And this is an amazing exhibit. And I know the photographs are a little challenging and, but there is hope, and the hope is in all of us. And I had the great privilege to work at one point in corporate philanthropy, and I worked for a national and international bank. And I made some really surprising discoveries because everybody comes to the bank to ask for money. And the truth is, when you look at corporate philanthropy, it is dwarfed by individual contributions. I mean, individual contributions make up 72% of the giving in the world. And the corporations give 15% comes from foundations, probably 8% from bequests, and 5% actually comes from corporations. It is an interesting field to look at because more and more young people are asking when they go to work for large businesses, what is your social responsibility policy? What is your philanthropy like? So it is something that's becoming more of a topic of discussion now. But the truth of the matter is that people, individuals, are what drive philanthropy. And the biggest groups would be the obvious ones that you would think of. Religious groups, obviously, universities are huge. A lot of people, of course, give directly to health and human services kinds of organizations. United Way is a perfect example where people can give, and it funds a broad range of services directly in their community. A lot of corporations obviously give strictly out of good thoughts and hopes for their community, and I think they all do, but many of them give in focused areas that are aligned with their business interests. So it's not unusual to see grocery stores supporting food banks or banks supporting affordable housing because they fund home loans. So they're natural connections. And we're really blessed in Baton Rouge that we have some really great people working on all these issues. The food bank is a tremendous asset to our community. They stood up in ways that were just amazing during Katrina. And I will say that Hope Ministries is another one that I really love because they actually have the only client choice food bank. Most food banks are food distributions through churches and things like that, or civic organizations. You get a box of food, and this is your box of food. Well, at Hope Ministries, you get to go choose your food. Well, how decent is that? I mean, that's really, why aren't we doing that everywhere? But anyway, it's probably not possible. But I just want to say that Baton Rouge is a very giving community, and I'm sure everybody on this call is a philanthropist in the way that you give your time or your talent or your treasure. And I just want to thank you all for being part of this call, and thank Caroline for pulling it together. And I hope you all come see us at the All-State Capitol.
Yeah, and you'll probably be greeted by a fellow philanthropist because most of the staff over there are unpaid volunteers, and they've been there for decades. That's how dedicated they are. Hey, thanks, Mary. I appreciate it. Yeah, I was surprised that individual philanthropy just dwarfed corporate philanthropy. And although my son was not, so there you go. Generational stuff. Thanks, Mary. Well, Howard's answer to the Buffett challenge was to go for it. And the first thing he did was to learn more and more and more about it. Second thing he did was to get to know even more. The Howard Buffett Foundation is committed to find out more about geographical challenges in farming, local foodways, and what's getting in the way of people and the food they need to survive and thrive. Here he is on the right with his camera. I think he's so adorable. Anyway, the exhibit, because the expression 40 chances means so much to him personally, has 40 images. He took a lot more than that. The book, which I recommend, has 40 chapters. Which reminds me to invite you again for our first ever online virtual book club, another first for us. I'm not quite sure how to do this, but I'm hoping it's of interest to enough of us to see how it all works. We'll start with question and comment prompts on May 1st, and you can join the discussion at any point. You'll all get an invitation if you like, how to join via Facebook, and then you can make I think it'll be a Facebook page, and then you can make comments through June 26th, which is the end of the exhibit. The book is a really easy read, tough read. I got to admit, I skimmed some of the soil chemical parts, but other than that, I was fascinated and wanted to read more, and I did. And now I would like to open up our mics, and I think our host does that, or you can do that individually. So the free thinkers can have an open discussion as you do at your regular meetings, and anyone who wants to join the free thinkers, please feel free to stay on, but if you decide to leave, that's fine. A recording of this talk will be available and sent out to you, to those of you who signed up to join us tonight, and especially for those who for some reason or another couldn't get on the call. And I'm going to check out the chat box to see if we've got any questions there. But I'd like to start our free thinkers discussion with a thought I had, and then I will be quiet and let you all either ignore that thought or respond to it. But I did do some research about humanists and their level of philanthropy, and it's very, very interesting. So I just noticed, living in South Louisiana, because I didn't grow up around Roman Catholics, that the Catholic Church tends to be extremely organized. So last month or two, we had a program with the descendants of the orphan train riders, who were children who were 100 years ago were brought here by train through this organized effort through the Catholic Church, from the tenement slums of New York City to places like Opelousas, Louisiana. Those kids were either orphans or left by their parents, who were destitute and had no other recourse but to leave their children at foundling hospitals in hope that their kids could somehow have a better life. And the Catholic Church organized nationwide and decided to put these kids on trains and shoot them out to new communities. The agreement was that they would be raised Catholic, and that these kids would then have a family and a home and a place to live. My question to talk about is, or maybe it's more of a comment. What I found was free thinkers are also extremely philanthropic as individuals and through humanist charity groups. Studies show that the amount of giving is a little bit higher, statistically equal, when comparing religious and non-religious institutional giving. I'd be more specific, but I really should stop and hear your comments. I'll pull myself away from screen sharing, check the chat box, and open this up to discussion. And thank you all for listening. I didn't hear any snoring from you, Ron, so I'm very proud.
No, I'm still awake.
Yeah, Ed.
I just had a quick question, Caroline. Thank you. What a great presentation.
Oh, gosh, thanks.
Who is the rocket guy that would help you? I may know him.
Yeah, I bet you do. I've got to look up his name because I remembered his name as something else. I remembered his name as Jared Smith, and I know that is not the same guy. So I'm going to look up that name and get to you because I know you know him. He had several rockets and he helped us out
Is it Bob Mosier?
every year. Say that again?
Is it Bob Mosier?
Yes, Bob Mosier.
He worked for me when I had my rocket company.
Oh my gosh. So he told us, he said, man, I love these rockets, but hearing these kids scream every time we blast one off makes it even better.
When was the last time he did this?
Well, my kids are now in their 20s, zooming towards 30. So this was 15 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
So, wow. Of course you know him, but I just could not think of the name.
Because I was giving a rocket class to some kids downtown, and he saw this and called me. And because we rocket guys are like Jehovah's Witnesses, once we find out, we start giving everybody the literature. And I flew the little rockets, and then he got me into the giant rockets, and that's where it all began.
Oh, that is amazing.
But I do have a guy in my radio control flying club who wants to give a rocket class to a group of people. He's a very generous man. He's a kind-spirited man. Anyway, that's all I want.
Oh, wow. Cool. Hey, and I'm looking at your comments here. Ed, that is so cool. There's so many connections between all of us. And that's a cool one, the rocket one. Yeah, I didn't even know. They said, okay, we're going to try to earn a badge and blow off some rockets. I had no idea they could be that big and powerful and amazing. And yeah. By the way, your friend lost one of his rockets because it accidentally launched into an adjoining neighborhood. So
donation is what it is. It's a donation.
He was a philanthropist, yes. All right, so shoot. I'm mostly getting comments that some of our free thinkers couldn't make it into the meeting. Rats. So I changed the time.
It wasn't that, Caroline. It was once the thing started, it said blocked. The host has blocked access, and so I went out to get try to get a link for somebody. I had to leave the screen, and then I couldn't get back in either and even though I'm registered.
Oh, rats!
For next time.
So that's Eventbrite adding this other layer of confusion. Okay, so I changed it so that people could enroll up until 8 p.m. Rats. Okay, that's not a good thing because often our folks are late and we wait a few minutes for people to come in, but they can't come in after a certain time. I didn't know that until now. Rats. So how short are we on free thinkers? Are we like 80% off?
Well, I got texts from 3 people that wanted to get in.
Oh, rats. I'm so sorry. The only consolation I've got is we'll record this and send it to everybody who registered. I'm sorry, guys. What Eventbrite does and why we use it is it helps us capture emails. It also makes sure that because we're a public body, that we're not hacked in some sort of way. It adds an extra layer there, but maybe there's another way to do that.
One other thing that I would add, I'm not sure if your boss is still, if your supervisor is still on.
He is.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
That the registration deadline was stopped way before the event, and so, as you know, Caroline, you had to open it up again, and it was still only until 6 o'clock, and then we had to push it again until 7. Somebody out there kept wanting to shut this thing down, and it was frustrating trying to get in. So I think they should not close registration until the event begins, or even then some. But I think registration was closed at 3 or 4 in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, well before the event started.
Okay, and she's here. She just muted, and she will hear if she doesn't hear this now. I'm reporting on this as part of the assessment of this program, because every time we want to get better. And we've had issues each time because this is still new for us. I'm sorry about that,
Not your
gosh.
fault.
Well, how many folks do we have out there who are interested in an open discussion or have any questions for me that didn't appear in the chat box? Margot just disappeared in the backdrop there. There she goes.
I went to get a chair, so I was kneeling before.
There,
They're
oh
in
yeah.
Florence.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had, I volunteer for Heifer International that has a lot of statistics about, about how if you give a woman, I don't know where I go.
Yeah, that's okay.
Because we can still hear you even when you
Margot, we
disappear.
can hear you, and plus it looks really cool.
Yeah, about if a woman gets money from a source, she will invest it back into her community and her children. Whereas, I had it on my computer, but I'm not at my computer anymore. If a man gets the same amount of money, he'll invest it in himself and leave the village and go to the big city or something. So,
so what do y'all think
Wine,
about
women, and
that?
song.
I'd like to hear from the guys what they think about that.
no, but
I've read,
it's statistic. It's a statistic that they
yes,
have gathered because this is what Heifer does a lot of focus on empowering women, and every time they help women in a village, they have a lot more success than when they used to help the men. Also, your whole Howard Buffett's idea or the comment about sending food, how that's so much less effective than buying food locally for the people. Heifer International used to send animals way back in the 50s and 40s. And then in the 60s and 70s, they decided, well, if we don't send animals, because if we send animals, they arrive damaged or injured or traumatized. They arrive not necessarily acclimatized to the local environment and parasites, and the local people may not know what to do with them. And if they instead use that money that they would have saved in shipping to buy local animals that are already acclimatized, that solved a lot of problems all in one fell swoop. So I like his idea of not sending food, but helping local growers grow whatever is already common to that area.
yeah, and yet you're right, and yet it still happens because those feel-good photos are so powerful. And it looks like it's helping farmers here in the United States so much. It does. They buy the food from American farmers. But you're right. So I'm glad. I knew that Heifer International was doing that. And the other thing that you brought up is that this food being shipped was unrecognizable to the people getting it. They didn't know how to prepare it. There were religious problems with eating some of it. Yeah, there was one community, I wish I could remember where it is, Gambia maybe, and I'm not sure, but they were accustomed to eating these local insects because there weren't any, it was very difficult to grow crops there. So when this fresh food that looks great to us arrived, they just were really grossed out by it. I'd rather eat bugs. Sorry, that sounds so callous, but these things happen. They're cultural differences that you have to know about. These assumptions that are made can lead to big wastes of money. Yeah.
If I can just add to this concept of doing stuff locally. One of the things that I saw later in my career in the Marine Corps, we go to these different places, particularly in conflict areas, and we as the United States just throwing money at these different projects, which it's great on the surface. Let's go build the schools, build a hospital, and put all this tech gear. But quite often, the local people, either they didn't know how to use something, They didn't know how to do the maintenance. And what happens? We leave within a few months, the stuff breaks, it gets pilfered and whatnot. And as I was sitting here waiting to speak, I was thinking it seems like one of these things that, at least from my own experience, I can say that at least like my father did, he would just throw money. He would not give us his time. And that's a whole nother discussion, but I kind of saw that as, so as I've gotten older, I don't have much good to say about him for a lot of reasons. But if he would have spent his time with me, I would have liked him a lot more, most likely. And I'm certain at a much grander level, that type of thing would go a much longer way. Locals on the ground, yeah, they may be happy to be getting some money here and there. That's great. But you spend your time and you really put an effort in there for sustainability. I think that goes a much longer way than just throwing a few bucks here and there. And I'll stop right there.
That is-
Sustainability is really the key. Sustainability is the key.
Yeah.
There
That-
is
that-
a project called the Barefoot College where they go into communities and they find, you're talking about those older gentlemen who they needed to kind of retool those men who had the prestige of the community. Well, this organization called Barefoot College, what they do is they go into the communities and they find these old women who have no prestige, and they teach them how to become solar engineers. They take them, they go off, they take them to India for 6 months, and women from all over the world, from South America and Asia and everywhere, Africa, and they teach them how to set up solar panels, run the electricity, and then they go back to their villages and provide light. And suddenly these women who are little old widows and, suddenly they're very prestigious, and everybody counts on them for the local electricity in the village.
I love that. I
Yeah,
want to
keep
read
that
more
up.
about that,
It's called
Margot.
the
I love
Barefoot
that.
College.
I want to
I'm
be
gonna
one
run
of
my
those
mouth
people.
again for a second. So another thing I remember is many years ago, and I'm certain a lot of you all have heard something very similar. Christopher Hitchens was quite vocal about the empowerment of women in regards to enhancing peace and reducing poverty throughout the world. And I remember hearing about this, hearing him speak, reading his stuff before I retired. And when I did and went and pursued my, second round of studies, that was quite obvious to me, and a lot of the information I had access to, a lot of the different people at these various NGOs that I had the opportunity to meet and things like that. And that has actually rung quite strongly, or has stayed quite strongly with me. That point that he made is very nice to hear Howard Buffett, making the same basic point, just in a different way.
Yeah. And I like what you said earlier when you think about you'd rather have someone's time than money without the humanity associated with it, or without the time. Yeah, that's a really good way to see that. I know it's very personal for you, but in a wider sense, giving time can be much more valuable. And Margot followed that up with, and sustainability over time too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that giving of time, if you want to even take it from a kind of cold-hearted national security perspective, when you're building those relationships, you're making allies essentially, and it's going to reap benefits. Now, not in a single election term, but some, other people are going to make this benefit, but it's going to be a much larger national benefit. And that, I think you all know, that even happens just at the personal level.
Yeah, and sometimes a little bit of help in the right spot can trump, 100 times more resources squandered by, as you say, just throwing things. That I can't remember the name of the bank, but it's a famous bank that was lending $50 or $100 to women to buy sewing machines and being able to work in their house. Of course, and these were not electric sewing machines. I'm sure they were treadle sewing machines. And it was amazing that these women were able to have a livelihood when, and this has been going on now for what, 30 years, I suppose, or 40 maybe?
Yeah,
I'm sure.
It was called the Grameen Bank.
Yes, the Grameen Bank. I couldn't remember the name of it, but yes, that's it. Amazing idea that you would, loan someone $50. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's laughable that somebody would need a loan for $50 to start a business, but it was amazing.
Yeah, that was started by Muhammad Yusuf. He, if you want to read a really good book by Muhammad Yusuf, it's called Banker to the Poor. And he was a professor of economics in Bangladesh. And whenever he'd walk from his fancy building on campus, he'd pass all these beggars in the street. And he said, what is it I don't understand about economics? I hear I'm a professor of economics. So he stopped and he asked one of them, why are you so poor? And they said, well, I owe money to that guy on the corner because I borrowed money to buy, the materials to make these mats, and he's lending it to me at 300%. And he said, well, how much do you need? And the guy said, I just need $27. And he just gave it to him out of his pocket. And the guy said, I'll pay you back. And he did. And then after that, Muhammad Yusuf went with a bunch of grad students, and they just went around the community and they just handed out money to whoever, the exact amount. And then, they all paid back. And so they started this bank because all the bankers in town said, are you crazy? Don't lend to poor people. They'll never pay you back. We never lend to poor people. And so he said, well, we not only lend to poor people, we lend to women, which is supposed to be a bad investment. And they got much better returns in their paying back of loans than the actual big banks. They got paid back 97% or something incredible, because people would just take small micro loans, whatever they just need to start a tiny business, and they would pay it back.
And that book is called Banker to the Poor.
Yeah, Banker to the Poor by Muhammad Yusuf. And then that inspired an organization called Kiva, Kiva, where you can get online and make microloans to people all over the world. It's really fun. It's like I'm addicted to it. You get online and you just say, okay, here's a guy who just needs enough to buy a bicycle to deliver his produce. And you make a little donation there, you make another donation here and there. And by the way, you can get together with a group of people to make bigger loans to people who, co-ops who want to buy livestock or whatever. And the biggest group on there is atheists and agnostics. So that's Kiva, Kiva. If you want to get on their website, it is really addictive. And then you get paid back small amounts, but whenever I get about $25, then I reinvest it in someone else.
Oh, thanks, Margo.
But that was all based on Muhammad Yusuf's idea of the Grameen Bank. And so someone picked that up and put it on a computer, made it an internet lending thing. So people from their living rooms can just make little micro loans to people all over.
Thanks. I've heard of Kiva, but I've never done it. So I'm gonna add that to my list. Thanks. Cool.
So where is Howard Buffett right now?
Well, he didn't tell me, and it was probably from, somebody who works for him, because it just came from the Howard Buffett Foundation. But it was so folksy, I just assumed it was Howard, because I kind of have a little crush on the guy now. Warren Buffett apparently told his kids, look, I'll pay for your college, which is a big, big deal, but that's it. And none of them finished college. So there you go. The money he did give to them, they were ready to work before they finished. So Howard said, I always want to be a farmer. And I spent a year, I think, at the University of Nebraska. And it's like, I just want to get out there and farm. So, yeah. So I don't know where he is, and I'm not, I don't want to be a stalker or anything, but I wouldn't mind getting some sort of message out to him just about how much his book meant to me personally, because I do like to write authors when I really, really like their books. Now, the book club just came about because I actually went to already existing book clubs and asked them if their discussion could go online, and then people from the outside world could sort of observe that and add questions. And the first group said, no way. And the second group said the same thing. So the first group was people my age, and they're like, no. And then the second group was young people, like super woke. I hope they're not annoyed for me saying that, in their 20s. The oldest person's probably 32, I'm guessing. Anyway, and they were just like, no way, we like to really let it rip at our discussions, and we don't, they're private. So I just thought, well, I see all these discussions online and they devolve into silliness pretty quickly, but we'll just see. I don't even know if this will work.
Well,
But
Caroline, maybe we should form our own book club. A free
love to.
book club or something.
I would love to. I would love to. Yeah. And I feel like for me, reading is self-care, because I just gave up on reading because I thought, oh, that's taking too much time away from scrubbing the toilet. I don't know what the heck I was doing. So I am just so excited that I'm back into the gift of reading.
Good for
Reading
you.
is fundamental. You got it, Bart. Yeah. By the way, where'd you take that picture? It says Schmuck Cafe. Where is that?
So I was actually racking my brain earlier when I saw it. I can't remember if I took that in Geneva or in Bern, Switzerland, but it was from Switzerland. I'm pretty sure it was in Bern, because if I remember that particular day, I was going around. There was a Albert Einstein residence. He lived there for a little while, and he went and took a little tour of his little. It's like a big apartment, but it's the home. I mean, it was small, real small. Him and his wife lived there, but it was pretty neat. And of course, I saw this and I was like, I just can't walk by without taking a photo and getting a beer at this place.
Yeah,
Bart,
that's funny.
you said reading is fundamental. What have you read lately?
As a matter of fact, I am currently reading White Too Long by, I think it's Robert Jones, who is the CEO of the Public Religion Research Institute. As a matter of fact, those of you who might get church and state,
Okay.
yeah, he wrote a little piece about it, but it's about how.
Can you repeat his name and the title of the book?
Yeah, Robert P. Jones, and I'll type it in the chat in a second.
Okay.
But the short title is White Too Long, and there's a little bit extra, but it's about white Christian nationalism essentially being right at the core of white supremacy, or I might have that backward. The white supremacy being at the core of white Christian nationalism, and he's a Southern Baptist. He's not writing it. He's writing it from a place of frustration that, hey, you know, you people are sullying my beliefs and my good name, and what we as in a bunch of the other, probably the majority of believers, don't want to be associated with a lot of it. But I'm only about 2 chapters in. It's pretty interesting. Nothing I've come across so far doesn't make sense. It's one of those things. A good bit of what he says is from personal experience too. But you can kind of sit there and go, oh yeah, I remember seeing that, or I've come across that myself, or remember hearing about that a little bit somewhere in the news. That's what I'm on right now. That and rereading the Constitution.
Hey, there's a cool Constitution class that's free out of the Montpelier Institute, James Madison Montpelier Institute every week. And now they're working on the Bill of Rights. And I missed this last Tuesday. It's really interesting. I gotta admit, I don't, can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry.
but is it on Zoom, this class?
It's on Zoom, and I'll send you all the link to the next class. I'm not sure if you have to sign up for the whole series, which I did, but they'll offer it again. And I'll try to put it in the chat box if I can find it while we're talking. And if not, I'll send it to you, Margot, if y'all are interested.
Okay.
I work at a political history museum, and we're living through political history, and we have been pretty significantly in the last bunch of years. So I'm really interested in this stuff. And so of course, the pandemic has cut down our visitation, but, oh, thanks, Bart. I find that the kids are really, really interested. And in the past, it used to be the kids who you could tell their parents were talking at home, and just those kids. And now a lot more kids want to enter into the conversation. They just have questions and they want to know. So, yeah, I'm going to try to find that. The cool thing, the pandemic has been terrible, but the cool thing has been all these free online programs, and some of them are really, really good. So the one I missed was yours, Shahada. Missed it. So I'm going to look on YouTube now to hear that, because at some point I hope you can speak at the old state capitol.
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. Similar problem to what you faced. LSU systems IT people did not set up the Eventbrite correctly so that everybody off of campus could not get on.
Yeah.
So that was unfortunate because there was probably 150 people trying to get in.
Yeah.
On YouTube.
What is it? How would they find it on the link?
I can email it to y'all. I can.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, that I got the message. It just said your LSU credentials, please, or something like that. So yeah.
It was you'd think LSU would have had this nailed down.
Well, well, I guess that's our IT department too, probably same bunch of folks.
Yeah, just same people.
Oh boy.
So I know, Caroline, you and I were talking about earlier how the religious organizations have a long history of giving, like the Quakers and the Catholics, and so there's three levels of giving. One is relief when there's a crisis, and we have to immediately get blankets and water to people, like right after a hurricane or something. That's relief work. And then there's charity, which the Catholics are really good at. Charity where you make all these big donations. But what I like about Heifer and these other organizations is it's development. And development is where you develop something that will be sustainable and the people can take care of themselves. And what was I going to say about that? There's a lot of organizations that do that, like Heifer International. Because you were saying that, religious organizations are good at that. One organization that has its roots in atheism is something called Foundation Beyond Belief.
Yes.
And
yes.
They do development work around the world, but they're still small. They're not anywhere as big as Heifer International. But I still like Heifer because Heifer does not require people to, read Bible verses to come and get water or whatever. Heifer just goes in villages if people invite them and help them, at the local level, do some development work. But they, so I like Heifer for that. However, people think Heifer is religious because the Methodist Church and Presbyterians do give a lot to Heifer International, but they aren't religious at all. The organization is not. But this Foundation Beyond Belief is sort of like, if you go to the atheist conventions, American Atheist Convention and so on, they always have a booth there, you know, Foundation Beyond Belief. So that is something, you know, but they're still small, you know, they only reach people in a few places in the world so far.
Thanks, Margot. After we spoke, I did a little bit more research and I found Foundation Beyond Belief. And I found an article that they merged with another organization with the same principles, and they're a little bit bigger. But it is dedicated to giving, and yeah, it's really interesting. I just remember the first meeting that I went to, you said, gosh, you know, people look at, I'll just say non-believers, as if there's something wrong with them, because maybe they can't point to good things they've done in the community like they can with churches, say, or synagogues. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And yet research shows that there's just as much giving, whether someone's associated with a religion or not.
Yeah, like I say, if you go onto Kiva, you'll see that the agnostics and atheist group, it's called A+. It's one of the biggest groups that donate and make microloans to people on Kiva. One more thing, when you were saying about how giving makes you feel good, there was this group of people who made some donations to Kiva, you know, and there are these American ladies who decide they're going to go see the village where their donations helped. And so they went, and they were greeted by the co-op of other women who had used their money to start a business or something. And this one American woman comes running up to them and says, "Hi, my name is Betty, and I'm one of the ladies that gave money to you." And the lady, the third world lady, said, "Yes, and I'm the lady that paid you back." So she was able to keep her dignity, you know. I was like, yeah, I paid you back.
Oh, that's so great. Wow. Well, I had an uncle, and after he died, I found out that I was executor of his will, and he didn't give money to his family, but he gave $100,000 to the Dogs and Cats of Albuquerque to help stray animals, and the same amount to a longtime housekeeper. And one of the happiest, and other gifts of that size to other organizations. And one of the happiest days of my life was being able to give that check to this woman, Virginia Montoya, who I keep in touch with still. And it's just great. It was the best. It wasn't even my money. I just handing it over. I'm getting goosebumps now because it really made a difference in her life. So, yeah. And she probably still has 98% of it, even though that happened 12 years ago. Yeah. Makes you feel good, that kind of thing.
Well, I don't know how you guys are feeling. If you know, we don't have to stay all the way to 9 o'clock. If, you know, a lot of our free thinkers aren't here tonight, kind of the more chatty ones.
Again, my apologies about that.
That's okay. But it was a great talk, Caroline. You did a good job. That was
sure
very
was.
interesting. I didn't know that about Howard Buffett. That was so cool.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys. That's not really my field of expertise, and yet that was my book report. So I loved it. The exhibit is powerful. Those pictures are hard to see. Our previous exhibit, also about poverty, was easier to manage, I think, because it happened 100 years ago. And that was about these kids and their families who lived in tenement housing in New York City and worked 14-hour days and lived in awful places without plumbing. Here in the United States, in New York City, where some of the wealthiest people in the world were also living within blocks, of these people. So anyway, that exhibit was really interesting, but a little more hopeful. And it was actually, we had a photojournalist come and talk via Zoom. A friend of our supervisor, who's probably still on this call, and it was really interesting about, so 100 years ago, this guy named Jacob Riis, also an immigrant, didn't have a job, lived in tenements, finally got a job as a photojournalist and ran around and took these early photos from 100 years ago. And that's what was on display. But I noticed that these photographs, because it's happening now, it's tougher. They're in color, they're vivid. Anyway.
Caroline, how long is that exhibit on?
Till June 26th.
Oh, okay, that's a long time.
Yeah, usually exhibits come and go pretty quickly. And we've got a lot of other exhibits too. This really cool one that's going to be up all year because it was curated by our curator. And it's the women's suffrage story from Louisiana. An amazing story, also full of heartbreak. Very, very, very interesting story. And later on in the year, we're hoping maybe to talk about what happens next. Women have had the right to vote now for 100 years. Last year was a centennial. So what about the Equal Rights Amendment? Yes, no, maybe, moving on to other stuff. I don't know. I'd love to have a panel of the people who were around when that was debated in Louisiana, both for and against, and hear what they have to say, given today's perspective. So yeah, we talk politics at the old state capitol, and I love that stuff. So thank you all so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank
That was
you.
awesome. Thank you, Old
Thanks.
State Capitol. Caroline is a fantastic asset to the Old State Capitol.
Who said it's somebody? Well, thank you, whoever said that. Thank you.
It was me.
Thank you, Margot.
All right, well, I guess that's
Love you
it,
too.
unless y'all had anything else to say.
I don't accept to thank, I'd like to also thank the student who joined us, Shelby. She's a graduate student in public history. So good luck to you, Shelby. You've chosen a career that I chose, and you'll never make that much money, but you'll always be happy going to work. And Shelby's actually an online student at Liberty University. Interesting.
Really?
So yeah.
Offend you, Shelby, with our godless talk.
I think Shelby hung on throughout, and I know Liberty pretty well because my son went to school also in Lynchburg, Virginia. So I'm happy that she stayed. And Shelby, I'll reach out to you to see just what you thought of our program. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Caroline.
Really enjoyed the different perspectives. Thank you, Shelby.
Nice meeting you, Shelby.
And Shelby,
Okay.
this is our first time opening up a program to the public from a local group, in this case, the Free Thinkers. They asked me to speak, and I was like, well, I've got to do something for this exhibit. And they just adopted me. So thank you, Free Thinkers. Thanks.
Well,
Our
good
pleasure.
night. Thank you very much.
All
Rita.
right. Good night, everybody. Thanks so much. See you later from space, Margot and Ed. Take care, y'all. Thank you. All right, I gotta call Mary. Oops, I better turn off my mic so I don't get the double bubble.